They mocked Corporal Kate Brennan for weeks, laughed at her tattoo, and tried to destroy her with fake reports. What they didn't know was that every insult, every threat, and every mistake was part of her plan to expose the smugglers hiding inside their own base.
Have you ever seen a bully so sure of themselves they practically glow with arrogance? That was Staff Sergeant Ryan Hollis. He stood in the middle of the obstacle course, a smirk plastered on his face, and his voice boomed across the 35 soldiers sweating in the Georgia heat. "New girl thinks she's hot stuff," he announced to anyone who would listen. "I give her 10 minutes before she's crying for her mommy." It was the kind of morning where the sun felt like it had a personal grudge against you. If you've ever seen someone get picked on just for being quiet, then you know exactly what was about to happen. And trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. 20 feet away, Corporal Kate Brennan didn't even flinch. She was new, just 4 weeks in, a quiet transfer who did her job and kept to herself. To most, she was just background noise. But to a bully like Hollis, her silence was an invitation. "Hey, Brennan, you hear me?" he barked, stomping closer. "Need a head start? You know, since this course was made for actual soldiers." A few of his buddies snickered. His number one follower, Corporal Draven, even gave the guy next to him a nudge. But Kate? She just stood there, her face a perfect blank canvas. Without a word, she began to roll up her sleeves. First the right, then the left, each movement smooth and precise. And as the fabric gathered at her elbows, we all saw it. Her forearms were covered in old scars, but that's not what caught everyone's eye. It was the ink. On her left arm was a massive tattoo of a bald eagle, its wings spread wide. In its talons, it clutched what looked like a string of numbers and letters, some kind of code. This wasn't some cheap impulse tattoo. This was a serious piece of art, the kind that costs a fortune and tells a story. Hollis's nasty grin got even wider. Well, what do we have here?" he sneered, pointing at her arm for everyone to see. "Look, everybody! New girl got herself some tough guy ink. That's so cute. Where'd you get that?" The prize counter at a carnival. The laughter got louder this time. Draven even pulled out his phone to snap a picture. For the first time, I saw a muscle in Kate's jaw tighten. She ignored them, turning to the massive rope in front of her. But the way she grabbed it was different. It wasn't the clumsy grip of a rookie. Her hands locked on with a practiced precision that screamed muscle memory. All the way across the yard, Master Sergeant Dale Jackson, a 52-year-old veteran who had seen it all, paused what he was doing. He'd been watching the whole thing, but something about the way Kate held that rope, combined with that eagle tattoo, made his eyes narrow. That design, that code, it sparked a distant memory of a top-secret briefing and files that officially didn't exist. He started walking slowly toward the group, a strange look on his face. Kate took a slow, measured breath. In for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4. It was a breathing technique, a tool for focus. But Hollis was too busy running his mouth to notice. "Seriously, Brennan, that tattoo is hideous. It looks like a bird had an accident on your arm." Finally, Kate released the rope and turned to face him. She just stared, her silence more powerful than any comeback. Hollis, thinking he'd won, scoffed. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Then, in a blur of motion, she turned back to the rope and started to climb. Now, a passing time for the rope climb is 30 seconds. If you're really good, you might do it in 25. Kate hit the bell at the top in 22 seconds flat. She moved like a machine, no wasted energy, just pure, controlled power. When she came down, she didn't just slide. She walked her hands down with perfect technique, landing on her feet without a sound. The entire yard went dead silent. Then, Hollis started a slow, sarcastic clap. "Wow, beginner's luck, everybody. Let's see if she can do it twice." A few people looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. But Master Sergeant Jackson knew exactly what he had just seen. That wasn't Army training. That grip, that breathing, that was SEIR, school survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. That was Special Forces stuff. People who graduate from that school don't just end up as quiet admin transfers. While Hollis was busy trying to save face, Kate calmly walked over to the water station, took a drink, and pulled out a small notebook, jotting something down as if nothing had happened. Hollis was clearly rattled. His sidekick, Draven, tried to step in. "What you writing in your little diary, Brennan?" "Dear diary, the mean sergeant was mean to me today." Kate just clicked her pen shut, slid the notebook into her pocket, and gave him that same flat, unreadable stare. Draven actually took a step back. Hollis jumped back in, his voice loud and shaky. "All right, everybody, let's move. Wall climb is next." "Brennan, try not to break a nail." As the group moved to the 12-foot wall, Master Sergeant Jackson fell in step beside Kate. "That ink," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "That code on your arm. Where did you serve?" For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Kate's face recognition. "Can't say, Master Sergeant," she said quietly. Jackson nodded once. He knew better than to push, but the pieces were clicking into place in his mind. Task Force 17, Operation Sandstorm, the unit that officially never existed, the mission that saved 40 lives. And the eagle insignia, if that tattoo was real, Corporal Brennan wasn't just a soldier, she was a ghost. Hollis, trying to reassert his dominance, went first, scrambling over the wall with a lot of loud grunting. When it was Kate's turn, he made a big show of looking at his watch. "We'll give you the full 2 minutes, Brennan. Don't worry." She started her climb, and behind her, Jackson watched her every move. But something was wrong. Jackson had seen Hollis fiddling with the wall earlier. As Kate reached for the final handhold at the very top, it ripped loose from the wall. Metal scraped wood, and for one terrifying second, she was dangling 12 feet in the air by one hand, swinging out over the hard-packed dirt. The whole group gasped. But Kate didn't fall. In a move that defied physics, her core tightened and her other hand shot up, slapping the top edge of the wall. Her fingertips dug into the wood with a grip that shouldn't be possible. With a single, brutal surge of power, she hauled herself over the top and landed gracefully on the other side. The yard was silent. Jackson knew what he had just witnessed. That wasn't luck. That was elite training taught only in the most secret corners of the military. Hollis was the first to speak, his voice laced with panic. "See! Somebody must have loosened that for her so she could look like a hero." Kate walked back around the wall, her breathing still perfectly controlled. She didn't say a word. She knew he'd done it, and he knew she knew. But Draven, ever the fool, got right in her face with his phone. "Smile, fake war hero. This is going viral in the group chat." And he snapped 3 pictures, sealing his own fate. Her tattoo, her face, the wall. Then he spun around, his thumbs a blur across his phone screen. Less than 30 seconds later, the pictures exploded in the unit's private chat group. 18 people hit the laughing emoji. The comments started pouring in. "Wannabe alert, Pinterest tactical, cute ink, did your boyfriend draw it?" Brennan glanced down at her forearm. The eagle stared back, its talons clutching a code that only a handful of people on the planet could even verify. She pulled her sleeves down, covering it up. Not because she was ashamed, but because she was calculating. Hollis was loud. Draven was sloppy. And loud, sloppy people make big mistakes when they think they're winning. Have you ever been completely misjudged just because of how you look? If you believe that karma always finds its way, even if it takes a while, hit that like button and smash the thanks button to help us keep telling stories just like this one. The training day moved on. Next on the schedule was a tactical gear inspection, followed by a timed ammo can carry. Lieutenant Marcus Carver, the officer in charge of the range, showed up around 0945 to supervise the rest of the drills. He was 30, had sharp features, and was so by the book it made him either incredibly reliable or incredibly dangerous, all depending on which side of the rules you were on. He came armed with a clipboard and a reputation for having zero tolerance for safety violations. During the ammo can carry, Hollis saw his chance. While Brennan was in the middle of a lift, he pulled Lieutenant Carver aside over by the equipment shed. Jackson, who was about 20 feet away restocking climbing rope, had to strain to hear them over the noise of the yard. He only caught bits and pieces. "Safety protocol violation, sir," Hollis was saying, took her gloves off during the climb. Could have gotten someone hurt. Carver's brow wrinkled with concern. He glanced over at Brennan, who was just setting down a 40-pound ammo can with perfect form back straight, knees bent. Hollis slid a piece of paper into his hand, a report he'd scribbled out with today's date and Brennan's name right at the top. Carver gave it a quick scan, his face impossible to read. You're filing this officially, Sergeant Hollis? Yes, sir. Regulations are regulations. Carver gave a slow nod. I'll look into it. As Hollis walked away, he was wearing a smirk that made Jackson want to clench his fists. Filing a false safety report was a huge deal. It could launch an investigation, lead to a suspension, or even get you kicked out of the service if the higher-ups wanted you gone. And Hollis had just turned the entire system into a weapon against someone who wasn't even fighting back. After Hollis was gone, Jackson walked right up to Carver. Sir, permission to speak freely? Carver looked up from his clipboard. Go ahead, Master Sergeant. I was the one supervising the wall climb. Corporal Brennan had her gloves on the entire time. I can personally vouch for that. Carver looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Noted. But Sergeant Hollis has filed a formal complaint. I'm required to investigate. Understood, sir. I just wanted the official record to show what I actually saw. Carver's eyes flicked over to Brennan. She was now helping a younger private fix their grip on an ammo can, quietly showing them the right way to place their hands. She was being patient and instructive, not exactly the actions of someone who cuts corners. I appreciate the input, Master Sergeant. Jackson walked away, his jaw tight. He'd done what he could inside the chain of command. Now it was up to Carver to decide if he was going to follow the evidence or play politics. The drills dragged on. At 1100 hours, Carver called for a water break. The soldiers scattered into the shade, grabbing water bottles and protein bars. Brennan sat by herself on a bench near the gear racks, peeling an orange with slow, deliberate care. Jackson watched her from the other side of the yard. She wasn't fidgeting, she wasn't checking her phone, she wasn't looking for anyone to talk to. She just sat there in silence, eating her orange slice by slice, her eyes fixed on something far away. Over by the bathrooms, Draven and a couple of others were huddled together, staring at their phones, their shoulders shaking with laughter. Jackson knew without looking that they were scrolling through the group chat, adding more insults, more jokes, building their own story. Brennan the wannabe, Brennan the fake, Brennan the easy target. What they couldn't see was the way her left hand was resting on her leg, her fingers tapping out a strange rhythm. 4 taps, a pause, 4 taps, a pause. It looked like a code, or maybe a way to keep herself calm. Or maybe both. At 11:15, Carver strode into the middle of the yard and called out, Brennan, front and center. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Brennan stood up, brushed the orange peel dust from her hands, and started walking. Her pace was steady, not rushed at all. When she came to a stop in front of Carver, she stood at parade rest, hands clasped behind her back, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Carver held up the report Hollis had given him. Corporal Brennan, I've received a safety complaint about your conduct during this morning's wall climb. Specifically, an allegation that you removed required protective gloves, which is a violation of training protocol. Do you have a response? You could have heard a pin drop. 35 pairs of eyes were glued to Brennan. Hollis stood off to the side, arms crossed, with a smug look on his face. Draven had his phone out again, recording the whole thing. Brennan's voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet but firm. I wore my gloves the entire climb, sir. Master Sergeant Jackson can confirm that. Carver glanced at Jackson, who gave a single, firm nod. Hollis immediately stepped forward, his voice getting louder. Sir, with all due respect, I was closer to the wall. I saw her take them off halfway up. Carver looked back and forth between them. Hollis, loud and sure of himself. Brennan, quiet and still. Jackson, steady and certain. 3 different stories. The only video was from Draven's phone, which, surprise, surprise, didn't show any clear details of her hands. Corporal Brennan, until we sort this out, you're suspended from the rest of today's drills. Report to the company office at 1300 hours to give a formal statement. Brennan's expression never flickered. Yes, sir. Dismissed. She turned and walked toward the gear shed to grab her things. The whole yard broke out in whispers. Hollis shot a victorious look at Draven. Jackson just watched with a stone-cold expression as Brennan packed her bag, her notebook, and her water bottle. She moved without any rush, methodical and calm, as if being publicly humiliated was just another Tuesday. But Jackson noticed her breathing had changed again. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. As she walked past Hollis on her way to the exit gate, he leaned in and muttered, just loud enough for her and a few others to hear, "Told you, this wasn't your place. You should have stayed wherever it is you came from." She stopped, turned her head just enough to look him in the eye, and for the first time all day, she smiled. It was a tiny, cold smile that didn't have an ounce of warmth in it. Then she just kept walking. Hollis was left frowning, like a man who just won a fight but somehow felt like he'd lost. Draven just laughed it off and slapped him on the shoulder. "She's finished, man. Carver is going to bury her." Hollis nodded, but his eyes stayed on Brennan until she was completely out of sight. Jackson waited until everyone had headed off for lunch before he pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his old contacts until he found a number he hadn't called in 3 years, and he pressed dial. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Jackson, this better be good." "It is. I need you to run a name for me, off the books." "Who is it?" "Corporal Kate Brennan. She's here at Fort Benning. Transferred in about 4 weeks ago." "What's the problem?" "She has a tattoo. Task Force 17 Eagle, Operation Sandstorm Code." There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Are you sure? I'm looking right at it." "That unit doesn't exist on paper, Dale." "I know." More silence. "Give me 2 hours. I'll call you back." The line clicked dead. Jackson put his phone away and stared out at the now empty training yard. The sun was getting higher, and heat was starting to shimmer off the red Georgia clay. In the distance, a drill sergeant was barking out orders. Life was going on as normal, but Jackson had a strong feeling that normal was about to come to a screeching halt. At 1300 hours, Brennan sat in a drab, gray-walled office across from Lieutenant Carver. He was looking over her service file on his computer, and the file was thin, suspiciously thin. Basic training, advanced training in administration, an assignment with a logistics unit in Germany, and then a transfer back to the States. There was nothing special about it. Nothing that could explain the tattoo, or the way she climbed, or how she recovered from a slip on the wall like someone who'd done it 1,000 times before, probably under fire. Carver leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Corporal, your record says you're in admin and logistics support. It says you've never been deployed to a combat zone." "That's correct, sir." "Then explain the tattoo." Brennan's hands were resting calmly on her knees. "It's personal, sir." "Personal? In what way?" "What's it a tribute to?" "Someone I used to know." Carver's eyes narrowed. "Someone you knew had clearance for a Task Force 17 insignia?" Brennan met his gaze without blinking. "I can't speak to that, sir." "You can't? Or you won't?" "Both, sir." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Carver started tapping a pen on his desk, thinking he had Hollis's official, damning report on his right. He had Jackson's conflicting, insistent testimony in his head. And sitting right in front of him was a corporal who climbed like a special forces operator, stayed cool under public fire, and wore a tattoo that shouldn't even exist outside of highly classified files. Nothing was adding up. "Corporal Brennan, I'm going to be straight with you. If you're lying about your service record, that's enough to get you discharged. If that tattoo is a case of stolen valor, that's a criminal offense. But if you're telling the truth, and there's something in your file that's been blacked out or is classified, I need you to give me something to work with. Anything. Sergeant, I need a name, a contact, something more than a gut feeling. Because right now, one of my sergeants is filing a report that says you're either a fraud or a fool, and I have nothing to prove him wrong." Brennan just sat there in silence for 10 seconds, then 15, then 20. Carver waited her out. At last, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She slid it across the desk. On it, in neat block letters, were a phone number and one word: Sandstorm. "Call that number, sir. Say the word. They'll tell you what you need to know." Carver picked it up. "And if they can't?" he asked. "Then I'm exactly what Sergeant Hollis says I am. Carver stared into her eyes, looking for any hint of a lie. He found none. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. Dismissed for now. But stay close. I'll be in touch. Brennan stood, delivered a crisp salute, and walked out. Carver was left alone, staring at the door. He pulled out the piece of paper and wondered just what kind of trouble he was about to stir up. Outside, the sun beat down on the base. Brennan walked across the main yard, a ghost moving through crowds of soldiers on their way to dinner. She passed the motor pool, where engines rumbled and officers yelled. She was there, but it was like no one could see her. Near the admin building, Draven and a couple of his buddies were leaning against a wall, glued to their phones. When Brennan walked by, Draven shouted, "Hey, Brennan, heard you got pulled from the training roster. Bummer, maybe don't lie about your skills next time." His buddies snickered. Brennan didn't even turn her head. She just kept walking, her pace steady, her breathing controlled. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Draven's smile faded. Did she really just ignore me? He muttered. Guess she's got nothing to say for herself. They all went back to their phones, instantly losing interest. But as Brennan turned the corner, they didn't see her hand brush against her forearm, right over the tattoo hidden by her sleeve. They had no idea that every single insult, every photo, was being quietly logged, not by her, but by someone else. Someone watching from far away, with a whole lot of resources, endless patience, and a very, very long memory. At 14:30, Jackson's phone buzzed. He stepped away from the maintenance bay he was inspecting and answered, "Go for Jackson." It was the same gruff voice from before, but this time it was quieter, more serious. "Be careful, Dale. I looked into Kate Brennan, born in 1996, joined up in 2015. On paper, she's a squeaky clean admin clerk. And off the record, there was a pause. Off the record, there's a gap from 2019 to 2021. 24 months where she was supposedly stationed in Germany, but all the records of her flights and base access are either gone or blacked out. And that tattoo you saw? I described it to a guy who knows about these things. He turned white as a ghost. He said if that ink is real, she's no clerk. She's connected to Tier 1 operators. Maybe intel, maybe support, could have even seen some action. But whatever she did, it's buried under miles of red tape. Jackson felt his jaw tighten. Operation Sandstorm. The voice on the phone went low. I can't confirm that operation exists, Dale. Not officially, not unofficially, but I'll tell you this. Anyone walking around with that ink on their skin either saved a hell of a lot of lives, or they know where a hell of a lot of bodies are buried. Or both. So what is she doing here, playing clerk in a training unit? The line went silent for a moment. That, I don't know. But you should be asking yourself this. What kind of person willingly takes a demotion, hides their real skills, and lets a clown like Hollis push them around? She's either running from something or she's hunting something. And my money is on hunting. The call clicked off. Jackson stood there, phone still to his ear, his mind racing. Hunting. It all made sense. Hollis hadn't just bullied her, he'd freaked out. He went from making fun of her to filing false reports in less than 3 hours. That wasn't just the bully being a jerk. That was a man trying to neutralize a threat before it could expose him. It meant Hollis had a secret, a big one. Jackson put his phone away and started walking fast toward the company office. He had to get to Carver before he made that call. He had to warn the lieutenant what he was walking into. But when he got there, the office was empty. A note on the desk said Carver had gone to the command building for a secure call. Jackson swore under his breath and turned to go. Just then, he saw Brennan through the window, crossing the yard back toward her barracks. And about 20 yards behind her, Hollis and Draven were following, holding their phones up and whispering to each other. Every one of Jackson's instincts went on high alert. He stepped outside, keeping all 3 of them in sight. They weren't getting close to her, just tailing her. Maybe filming her, trying to build some kind of fake case against her. It wasn't just random harassment anymore. It was calculated. It was like watching predators on a hunt. Brennan got to the barracks door and stopped. She turned around slowly and looked right at Hollis from 30 yards away. She didn't wave or shout. She just looked. And in that single look, Jackson saw something he hadn't seen in years. Something from his own time in the field. Patience. The kind of patience you have when you know your enemy is about to make a stupid, fatal mistake, and all you have to do is wait. Do you think she can really take them all down? Tell me what you think in the comments. As evening settled over the base, the usual sounds took over the clatter from the mess hall. The cooling ticks of big engines, the faint sound of unlucky recruits getting yelled at during late-night drills. Brennan was sitting by herself in the barracks common room with a worn-out book open on her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in 10 minutes. Around her, guys were watching TV, playing cards, and yelling about sports. She was just part of the background. At 1900 hours, her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't know. Training yard, 2100, come alone. She read it, deleted it, marked her page, and stood up. Nobody even saw her leave. The training yard felt completely different at night. The equipment cast long, creepy shadows, and the floodlights created bright circles of safety in a sea of darkness. Brennan showed up at 20:05, strolling in with her hands in her pockets like she was just out for a walk. The yard seemed deserted. Then, Hollis stepped out from behind an obstacle wall, with Draven right beside him. Two more of their crew were lurking by the climbing ropes, their faces mostly hidden in the shadows. Glad you could make it, Brennan. Hollis's voice had that same smug tone, but now there was something else under it, something desperate. Brennan stopped about 15 feet away and said absolutely nothing. You're making a mess of things, Hollis said, walking toward her. Stirring up trouble, making people antsy. We can't have that. Still, Brennan was silent, just that calm, steady, waiting. Draven took out his phone and showed her the screen. On it were the pictures from their group chat, but there was something new. He scrolled through screenshots of inventory reports, equipment serial numbers, and shipping records. And on a few of those records, there were names. Hollis's name, Draven's name. You're a smart girl, Brennan, Hollis said. I bet you've already put the pieces together. So here's the deal. Tomorrow, you're going to put in for a transfer. You're going to tell Carver this just isn't working out for you. And then you're going to vanish. Brennan's gaze shifted from the phone screen to Hollis's eyes. She still didn't say a word. Or, Hollis's voice dropped, we flood Carver's desk with so many complaints and screw-up reports that you don't just get transferred. You get a dishonorable discharge. The two guys by the ropes moved in, cutting off her escape. It was 4-1 in the middle of the night, with no one watching. Brennan took one slow, deep breath. In for 4, hold for 4. Out for 4, hold for 4. Then, in a low, clear voice, she finally spoke. No. Hollis literally blinked. What? No, she repeated. I'm not transferring. I'm not leaving. And you're going to have to do a lot better than fake reports and a few mean pictures. Draven let out a nervous laugh. You think you're some kind of tough guy? You think that stupid tattoo is going to scare us? Brennan's eyes locked onto him. It's not fake. Draven shot back. Prove it. A cold smile touched Brennan's lips. I am. Hollis's face twisted in anger. He took another step forward, so close she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. You have no idea who you're messing with. Yes, Brennan said softly. I do. The moment hung in the air. In the distance, a truck horn blared. The world kept moving, but right here, time had stopped. Hollis's hand moved like he was going for a weapon, but he stopped himself. He knew getting physical would be a line he couldn't uncross. Not yet. You're making a huge mistake, Brennan, he warned. Brennan just replied, We'll see. Hollis finally backed down and motioned for his guys to follow. They retreated like a pack of wolves, leaving Brennan standing alone in the bright lights. As they left, Draven glanced back over his shoulder, a look of confusion and maybe even fear on his face. Once they were gone, Brennan let out a long, slow breath. Her hands, which had been hanging loosely at her sides, unclenched. She had been ready for them to attack, ready to defend herself with just enough force, ready to end this whole thing right then and there. But they hadn't. And that meant they were still useful. They were still gathering the evidence for her, and they were still making plenty of mistakes. She took a path back to her quarters, one she knew was a blind spot for the cameras. Sitting on the edge of her cot, she pulled out a simple green notebook and jotted down 3 things: names, times, and direct quotes. She snapped a quick photo of the page and sent it to a contact with no name. 30 seconds later, a reply came back. Confirmed. Continue. She deleted the entire exchange, tucked the notebook away, and lay back. The next day would be another round, another test, and another opportunity for Hollis to make a mistake. And he would. They all did. People who think they're on top get sloppy, and sloppy people always leave a trail. Brennan closed her eyes, steadied her breathing, and let the familiar, calm rhythm pull her into sleep. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. On the other side of the base, Lieutenant Carver was sitting in his parked car, phone in hand, just staring at the number Brennan had given him. He'd just left a 2-hour classified briefing that created more puzzles than it solved. And now, he was about to make a phone call that could either save a soldier or completely wreck his own career. He dialed. It rang 3 times before a calm, professional voice answered. He stated his identity: Lieutenant Marcus Carver, Fort Benning. I was given this number by Corporal Kate Brennan. The password is Sandstorm. There was a heavy silence. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Then a simple stand by. The line didn't go dead, but it went quiet. Carver waited, feeling his heart start to pound. 90 long seconds crawled by. Suddenly, a new voice came on the line. It was older, and it carried an unmistakable weight of authority. Lieutenant Carver, you have 30 seconds to tell me why you are using this number. Carver's throat felt like sandpaper, but he forced the words out. Sir, I have a soldier in my unit who provided this contact for a background check. She's facing some accusations that just don't line up with her abilities. I need to know if her official service record is the whole story or if there's something I'm not cleared to see. Her name is Corporal Kate Brennan. Another pause, but this one was shorter. Her record is 100% accurate as it is written. That is all you need to know, Lieutenant. With all due respect, sir, that isn't enough. I've got sergeants filing reports, it's causing problems in the unit, and there's a tattoo that needs to be verified. The ink is authorized. Everything else is on a need-to-know basis, and you do not need to know. What you times need to do is ensure Corporal Brennan is shielded from any further harassment and is given the room she needs to finish her assignment. Do I make myself clear? Her assignment? Sir, did I stutter? Lieutenant Carver swallowed hard. No, sir. Good. Any more questions you have will go through the proper, official channels. This number is now deactivated. Do not call it again. The line clicked dead. Carver just sat there in his dark car, the phone still glued to his ear as his mind raced. Shielded. Assignment authorized. It all clicked into place. Brennan wasn't a victim here. She was a professional operator. And Hollis, whether he realized it or not, had just put a giant bullseye on his own back. Carver fired up the engine and headed for the company office. He had some official reports of his own to write, the kind that would put Hollis under a very bright, very uncomfortable spotlight. The next day was going to be very, very interesting. Back in her room, Brennan slept deeply, her hands resting on her stomach. Hidden by her long sleeves, the eagle tattoo on her forearm seemed to be standing guard in the darkness, its talons clutching coordinates that pointed the way to justice. The clock ticked past midnight. The base grew quiet, but it was a restless quiet. In that space between what was known and what was suspected, a storm was gathering. Part 1 didn't end with all the answers, but it left a solid promise that they were on their way. And when those answers came, there would be no turning back. The morning air was so thick with tension, you could almost taste it. It was 700 hours, and the training yard was already buzzing with hushed conversations and nervous, sideways glances. The gossip had spread like wildfire overnight. Brennan was suspended. Hollis had pressed charges. Carver was making strange phone calls. Deep inside the Army's administrative machine, gears were turning that no one could see but everyone could feel. Brennan wasn't even supposed to be there. Technically, she was on desk duty while they investigated. But when Jackson showed up at 7:15 and saw her sitting on that same bench from the day before, her gear at her feet and her face perfectly calm, he knew she wasn't there by chance. She was there because someone with authority had told her to be. Hollis saw her right away. All the cocky attitude he had the night before was gone, replaced by a nervous energy around his eyes. He started whispering frantically with Draven over by the equipment shed, and both of them kept checking their phones like their lives depended on it. Jackson found a spot where he could watch everything unfold, his notepad ready. Every one of his instincts was screaming that something big was about to happen. At 7:30, Lieutenant Carver walked out of the company building with 2 MPs flanking him. The entire yard fell silent. Soldiers who had been stretching and joking just a second before froze in place. MPs on the training grounds meant one thing: trouble. The kind of official trouble that leaves a permanent stain on your record. Carver's voice cut through the silence. Formation! Now! 35 soldiers scrambled to form ranks, their boots hitting the dirt with the sound of pure training. Brennan stood up from her bench to join them, but Carver raised a hand. Corporal Brennan, you remain where you are. She stopped, walked back to the bench, and sat down. Her hands were resting on her knees, perfectly relaxed. Jackson could see her breathing from across the yard, that steady 4-count combat rhythm, the calm before the storm. Hollis was standing stiffly in the formation, his jaw tight, his eyes darting from Carver to the MPs and back again. Next to him, Draven had gone ghostly pale, gripping his phone inside his cargo pocket like it was a lucky charm. The 2 guys who had backed them up during the confrontation were trying their best to fade into the background. Carver strode to the center of the formation, his hands clasped behind him. When he spoke, his voice was even, but it had an edge to it. Yesterday, accusations were made concerning Corporal Brennan's performance during a training exercise. Those accusations have been fully looked into. What I am about to do is not standard procedure, but given the situation and direct orders from the chain of command, it is necessary. He let that sink in. Master Sergeant Jackson, front and center. Jackson stepped forward with the calm, measured pace of a man who had seen it all. He snapped to attention beside Carver and waited. Master Sergeant, you were the supervisor for the wall climb exercise yesterday. Your verbal account contradicted Sergeant Hollis's written one. I need you to repeat your statement for the official record, right here, in front of everyone. Jackson's voice boomed across the yard. Sir, I had eyes on Corporal Brennan for the entire duration of the wall climb. She was wearing regulation gloves the entire time. The hook didn't hold because of equipment failure, not user error. Her recovery was perfect, by the book. She committed 0 safety violations. A low murmur swept through the ranks. Hollis's face got even darker, but he didn't dare say a word. Carver gave a single, sharp nod. Noted. Thank you, Master Sergeant. He then turned his attention to Brennan. Corporal Brennan, get on your feet. She stood up, slung her gear bag over her shoulder, and walked to the front. The whole yard was fixated on her every move. She stopped in front of Carver, stood at attention, and her face was a perfect mask. Carver looked at her for a long second, and in that quiet moment, Jackson saw a silent message pass between them, a confirmation of a plan set in motion. Corporal, I am about to give you an order, and you need to follow it exactly. Is that understood? Yes, sir. Roll up your sleeves. Both of them, all the way up to your shoulders. You could have heard a pin drop. Brennan's hands went to her right sleeve first. She undid the cuff and slowly rolled the material up past her elbow, over her bicep, until it was bunched at her shoulder. All they saw was tan skin, strong muscle, and a few faded scars from old training scrapes. Then, she started on her left arm, moving even slower, because everyone knew what was hidden there. The tattoo appeared inch by inch. First came the talons, the black ink, a sharp contrast on her skin. Then the eagle's body, its wings spreading wider as the sleeve climbed higher. And finally, there it was, fully revealed in the morning light. An eagle, its head facing forward, fierce and incredibly detailed. And underneath it, a code. TF 17, 2K, 19. And below that, in smaller letters, Op, Sandstorm. Jackson heard at least a dozen people gasp. He saw soldiers leaning in, trying to get a better look at the code. Hollis stumbled back a step, bumping into the soldier behind him as if he'd been punched. Draven's phone fell from his hand and hit the dirt. Carver stepped forward, inspecting the tattoo like a scientist. Master Sergeant Jackson, you spent 6 years with Joint Special Operations Command. Do you recognize this marking? Jackson's throat was tight, but his voice was rock solid. Yes, sir. That is a Task Force 17 insignia. That specific eagle design is used by maritime counterterrorism units under JSOC. And the operation code, it refers to a classified mission back in 2019. I'd seen that symbol once before, in a briefing I absolutely was not supposed to be in. And can just anyone get this ink? No, sir. That design is protected. Getting it tattooed without authorization is a serious federal crime. But having it and being able to prove you earned it, he trailed off, looking for the right words. It means she's walked in places that don't show up on any map, and she's done things that will never be written down in any report. A quiet, collective gasp rippled through the soldiers. This wasn't just talk. This wasn't some new recruit trying to look tough with stolen valor. This was the real deal. And every single person who had laughed, who had pointed, who had shared those pictures in the group chat, suddenly felt the solid ground turn to quicksand beneath their feet. But Carver wasn't done. Corporal Brennan, your service file says you're in administrative support. Logistics, coordination, nothing about ever being deployed to a combat zone. How do you explain that? He pointed at the tattoo. Brennan's voice was low, but it carried across the yard, crystal clear. My record is correct as it's written, sir. But what's not in the record is also correct. What does that mean? It means some things never get written down. Carver gave a slow nod, like this was the very answer he was expecting all along. Do you have any physical proof besides the tattoo? Any documentation or special identification? Brennan simply reached under the collar of her uniform and pulled out her dog tags, just 2 small metal plates hanging on a ball chain. They looked like standard issue, except for the information stamped into them. She lifted the chain over her head and passed them to Carver. He held them up to the light, reading the details out loud. Brennan, Kate, serial number B4471TF17. He froze, his eyes going wide. Master Sergeant, is this serial number format standard? Jackson moved in closer, took one look, and felt his own heart hammer against his ribs. No, sir. Standard Army serials never include unit designations like that. That format is reserved for personnel whose main service records are completely sealed off. It's a way to verify she is exactly who that tattoo says she is. Carver handed the tags back to Brennan, who slipped them back around her neck and tucked them away under her shirt. He then took a tablet from the military policeman next to him, tapped the screen a few times, and angled it so the entire formation could see. This is a classified personnel database. I was granted temporary access to it this morning by someone whose rank I am not allowed to mention. He typed in Brennan's serial number. The screen blinked, then a file popped up. Most of it was censored. Big black bars covered all the dates and locations, but a few things were still visible. There was a photo of a younger Brennan in full tactical gear, a long list of medals and commendations, all of them classified, and right at the bottom, a status line. Active. Special Assignment Phase 2. The gasps this time were loud and shaky. Someone in the back row whispered, "Holy cow." Carver shut down the tablet and handed it back. When he faced the formation again, everything about him had changed. This was no longer a lieutenant talking down to his subordinates. This was a junior officer addressing someone who moved in circles he could only dream of reaching. Corporal Brennan, his voice was now formal and full of respect. On behalf of this entire unit, I want to apologize for how you've been treated. The accusations against you are dismissed. Your conduct has been nothing short of exemplary. Then, in a move that made Jackson's own chest feel tight, Carver snapped to attention and delivered a sharp salute. The formation exploded, not with noise, but with movement. 35 soldiers scrambled to attention in a messy wave, hands flying to their foreheads in a salute. The gesture spread like a shockwave. even reaching the soldiers who had been part of Hollis's little group of bullies. They saluted because the moment demanded it, because rank and undeniable proof had just smashed into their prejudice and won. Brennan returned the salute, her movements precise and controlled, before lowering her hand. Her expression didn't change, but Jackson could see the tension around her eyes relax just a little. Being proven right, even when you knew you would be, still felt good. Carver dropped his salute and locked his eyes on Hollis. "Sergeant Hollis, step forward." Hollis was frozen in place. His boots seemed to be nailed to the ground as his face shifted from shock to anger, and then to something that looked a lot like pure panic. Draven gave him a shove, and he finally stumbled forward, his movements awkward and clumsy. "Sergeant Hollis, you filed a false safety report. You actively harassed a fellow soldier, and based on what we found so far, you might be involved in things that go way beyond simple misconduct." Carver nodded to the MPs. "You're confined to your quarters until a formal investigation begins. Hand over your phone, your ID card, and any other electronic devices you have." "Sir, Hollis's voice broke. "This is a huge mistake. I was just doing my job, making sure standards were met. By faking documents? By organizing a harassment campaign? By threatening a soldier off the record in the training yard at 2100 hours last night?" Hollis's mouth snapped shut. His eyes shot over to Brennan, who just stared back at him with that same calm, patient look. He had been so sure she was alone, an easy target with no friends and no way to fight back. But every single word he had said, every threat he had made, had been watched, recorded, and sent to someone with the power to do something about it. One of the MPs stepped up. "Sergeant, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. It's your call." Hollis's shoulders slumped in defeat. He pulled out his phone, his wallet, and his access card and handed them over. The MP sealed them in an evidence bag as the other one moved to stand behind Hollis. As they started to lead him away, he made one last desperate plea. "She's framing us. This whole thing is a setup. She came here to trap us all." Carver's expression remained like stone. "Keep talking, Sergeant. You're just making the investigators' jobs easier." They marched him away. Draven was still standing in the formation, visibly trembling as he watched his friend disappear toward the MP station. The rest of the soldiers were looking anywhere but at each other, the heavy feeling of their own guilt settling over them like a layer of dust. Carver called out to the formation again. "Corporal Draven, step forward." Draven did as he was told, his legs looking wobbly. When he stood in front of Carver, he looked like a man who was watching his entire life burn down right before his eyes. "Corporal, you have a very important choice to make right now. You took part in the harassment. You passed around images without her permission. You were there for an unofficial confrontation that broke multiple Army rules. But you're not the one who started all this." Carver's voice became softer, almost gentle. "So, I am going to ask you this one time, and your answer will decide what happens to you next. Are you involved in anything more than just harassment? Anything to do with equipment, inventory, or unauthorized sales?" Draven's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Sweat was popping up on his forehead, even in the cool morning air. He glanced at Brennan, looking for something, maybe forgiveness, or maybe just a clue about what he should do. She gave him absolutely nothing. Finally, in a voice so quiet it was barely a whisper, he said, "I need a lawyer." Carver let out a long sigh. "Take him." The second MP came forward. Draven didn't fight as they took his devices and led him away to follow Hollis. 2 down. The formation stood there in shocked silence, every soldier wondering who would be next. Jackson moved to stand beside Carver, speaking in a low voice. "Sir, what are we really looking at here?" Carver kept his gaze on the remaining soldiers. "It's bigger than I expected. CID has been tracking missing equipment for 6 months. Night vision goggles, body armor, weapon attachments. Small amounts at a time, but all very expensive. The trail led them to this unit, but they couldn't figure out who was behind it. So, they sent in an auditor." He glanced over at Brennan, someone who could blend in, watch what was happening, and draw out the guilty ones by looking like an easy target. And Hollis took the bait. Hollis didn't just take the bait. He swallowed the hook, line, and sinker. Jackson looked over at Brennan, who had gone back to her bench and was calmly rolling her sleeves down, covering up the tattoo that had just flipped the entire power dynamic of the base. How much of this did she set up? All of it, Master Sergeant. Every insult she took, every test she was put through, every single moment of humiliation was perfectly calculated to make Hollis and his crew feel overconfident. And it worked like a charm. We've got their phone logs, their chat records, surveillance video, and financial records. The second he tried to intimidate her last night, he gave us all the probable cause we needed to get search warrants. Carver checked his watch, which are being executed all over the base as we speak. Right on cue, Jackson's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, read the message, and his eyebrows shot up. CID just searched the logistics warehouse. They found 12 night vision units hidden in a storage container that wasn't on any official inventory list. Carver's jaw clenched. 12 units. That's over $100,000 worth of gear. This isn't just some petty theft. This is an organized smuggling operation. The formation was finally dismissed, but they were all told to stay on base and be ready for questioning. The soldiers walked away in quiet, nervous groups, pulling out their phones the second they were out of sight. The group chat that had been used to make fun of Brennan yesterday was probably blowing up with panicked messages today. Jackson walked over to Brennan, who was zipping up her gear bag with careful, methodical movements. "Corporal." She looked up. "Master Sergeant." That was both impressive and terrifying to watch. A small hint of a smile appeared on her lips. "Thank you. How long did you know about the smuggling ring?" "Since my second week here." Hollis was moving the stolen equipment through a civilian friend who runs a military surplus store just off base. Draven handled all the computer work, erasing the items from the inventory logs. 2 other guys in the unit acted as lookouts and muscle. It was a small crew, but they were good at what they did. And you let them harass you for 4 weeks because harassment makes people feel comfortable. They start to think they're the ones in control, and comfortable people get careless and make mistakes. She swung her bag over her shoulder. I needed them to be loud and sloppy. Mission accomplished. Jackson just shook his head, a mix of admiration and pure disbelief on his face. "You've got ice water in your veins, Corporal. Patience is a virtue, Master Sergeant. There's a big difference." Before he could answer, a voice cut through the air. "Brennan, my office. Now." It was Lieutenant Carver. She gave Jackson a quick nod and walked toward the company building, leaving him to watch her go. He saw this quiet soldier who had taken months of insults and threats like she was wearing body armor. She never got angry, never broke down, just waited. Waited for the perfect moment to show everyone who she really was. That's a kind of strength you can't learn in training. You have to earn it through fire. Inside the office, the lieutenant shut the door and pointed to a chair. Brennan sat down, looking relaxed but completely aware. Carver sat behind his desk, lacing his fingers together. "I have to ask, Corporal, off the record, why didn't you just show me your credentials on day 1? Why did you let them treat you like that?" Brennan paused for a second, collecting her thoughts. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and calm, but it had a power that seemed to fill the entire room, because predators only show their true faces when they think their prey is weak. "I let them look down on me. I used their disrespect as bait. Hollis wasn't just a bully, sir. He was the key to a smuggling ring that's been stealing from this base for months. If I had walked in here as an investigator, he would have clammed up, hidden the evidence, and maybe even disappeared. I needed him to be arrogant, loud, and careless." She leaned in just a little, her eyes fixed on Carver's. 6 weeks of their jokes and insults got me names, call records, and confessions they didn't even realize they were giving me. That tattoo wasn't just bait. It was the hook. Hollis couldn't help himself. He had to make fun of what he thought was a lie, a case of stolen valor. But every time he laughed, every picture Draven posted online, every fake report he filed against me was another piece of evidence. It documented the harassment, proved his intentions, and built a pattern of behavior that gave Criminal Investigations Division all the cause they needed. Carver just listened, completely captivated. "I didn't lose my dignity, Lieutenant. I turned it into a weapon. Every time Hollis tried to push me down, I made a note of it. Every time Draven shared a photo, it went into my file. Every threat, every confrontation, it all helped to build a case that is now completely solid. And as of this morning, 40 stolen night vision units have been recovered. 9 smugglers are now in custody. The entire supply chain has been cut off, and this unit is finally clean. She leaned back, her hands resting calmly on her knees. You asked why I stayed quiet. Because real justice isn't about being loud, sir. It's patient. It's about waiting for the guilty to hang themselves with their own rope and then acting with absolute precision. Her voice got a little softer. True strength isn't about making noise. It's about having discipline when no one is around to praise you. I kept my mouth shut so that the wrong people would start talking, and boy, did they talk. The office was silent for a moment, the only sound being the low hum of the air conditioner. Carver let her words sink in, the full picture coming into focus. This wasn't just an investigation. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Brennan had made herself the target, soaked up all the punishment, and used every bit of that abuse as ammunition. And she had played her part perfectly, without ever slipping up. That's... Carver struggled to find the right words. That's more than I ever expected to hear. You asked me to be honest, sir, and you were, he said. He opened a drawer and slid a file across his desk. This just came in from CID. They want you for a full debrief at 1400 hours. They want a complete report of everything you saw, a timeline, and your suggestions for making sure this never happens again. Brennan picked up the file and glanced at the cover. Understood. There's something else. Carver's expression turned a bit more serious. Your handler sent a message. As soon as the debrief is done and you've given your testimony at the court-martial, you're getting a new assignment, a new target, back in the States this time. Her eyes lit up with focus. Phase 2. That means something to you. It means the job isn't done. This story is a powerful reminder that patience is a superpower. If you believe in quiet strength and justice, share this so more people can see it. And stick around, because her mission is just getting started. Carver stood up, walked around his desk, and held out his hand. Brennan stood and shook it. It was a firm, professional handshake. For what it's worth, Corporal, you have my deepest respect. What you did took incredible courage and intelligence. I'm truly sorry you had to go through all of that to get the job done. It was necessary, sir, and it worked. She let go of his hand, took the file, and turned to leave. Just as she reached the door, Carver called out her name one last time. Brennan. She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. That thing you said about justice being patient, I'm going to use that. For the first time, a real smile spread across her face. It's all yours, Lieutenant. The door clicked shut behind her. Carver sank back into his chair, just staring at the empty seat, his mind replaying their conversation. All across the base, the wheels of military justice were turning. Hollis was about to face a court-martial for theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Draven would probably cut a deal to get a lighter sentence. The rest of their crew would be picked up within hours. And Brennan, she would move on to the next mission, the next target, the next group of people who made the mistake of underestimating the quiet girl in the corner. The consequences were already starting. The fallout was swift and widespread. Within the hour, Hollis and Draven were officially charged and locked in the brig, waiting for their trial. Their phones and laptops were confiscated, and digital forensics teams immediately found encrypted texts, transaction logs, and messages with the owner of an off-base surplus store. By noon, that civilian was in federal custody, and his shop was being taken apart by federal agents. Then came the personal consequences. Hollis was stripped of his rank, lost his security clearance, and his military career was over. His family was called. His name was now permanently linked to this disgrace. Draven, facing the same fate, decided to cooperate and spent the afternoon in an interrogation room, telling investigators everything he knew to save his own skin. The 2 other soldiers who acted as Hollis's muscle were identified from security footage. They were brought in for questioning and claimed they knew nothing about any smuggling, saying they were just following Hollis's orders about Brennan. Whether that was true or not would come out later, but their careers were already damaged just by being associated with him. The professional consequences hit the whole unit hard. By 1500 hours, the battalion commander had ordered a wall-to-wall audit of all sensitive gear. All training was put on hold for 48 hours while investigators interviewed everyone. New rules were announced: mandatory ethics classes, new inventory checks, and a new anonymous tip line to report misconduct. The message from the top was loud and clear. This unit had failed to police its own, and that was going to be fixed, one way or another. The social consequences spread across the base like a shockwave. All the soldiers who had joined in on mocking Brennan, who had shared the pictures of her tattoo, who had laughed at the jokes, they were all pulled into uncomfortable meetings with their superiors about respect and command climate. Most of them didn't face charges, but their names were put on a list. Their judgment was now in question. And in the military, where your reputation is everything, that's a stain that doesn't wash out easily. The group chat where Draven had posted the photos became a key piece of evidence. Every single person in that chat was ordered to go to counseling. Several were even transferred to different units to break up the toxic environment for good. By 1700 hours, as the day started to cool down, the training yard was empty except for two people, Jackson and Brennan. They had both given their official statements and been cleared to go. Jackson found her sitting on the same bench where it had all started, staring at the obstacle wall where her hook had supposedly failed. "Thinking about giving that climb another try?" he asked, sitting down next to her. "No, I'm thinking about how many times I almost gave up," she admitted softly. Week 3 was the hardest. Hollis had managed to convince nearly everyone that I was useless. I didn't have a single friend, no one to talk to except my handler through encrypted texts. Every single morning I had to wake up and make the choice to keep pretending to be weak. "But you never did quit," he said. "No, because if I quit, they would have won. And even worse, the smuggling would have kept going. More gear would be stolen, our enemies would get stronger, and maybe some of our own people would lose their lives because our night vision gear ended up in the wrong hands." She finally turned to look at him. "I couldn't live with that on my conscience." Jackson just nodded slowly, understanding. "You know, when I first saw that tattoo, I thought maybe you were running from something in your past." "I was hiding, Master Sergeant," she replied. "But not from my past. I was hiding in plain sight, just waiting for the bad guys to show themselves. And now I get to move on. There's always another mission, another target, another group of people who think the quiet ones are the weak ones." A small, sharp smile touched her lips, "And I'm going to spend the rest of my career proving every single one of them wrong." They sat together in a comfortable silence as the sun went down. Across the base, in the CID offices, investigators were putting together the mountain of evidence that would send several people to prison. In the brig, Hollis was staring at a concrete wall, trying to figure out where he had gone so wrong. In the battalion commander's office, new policies were being written that would bear Brennan's invisible signature for years. And in a quiet, unmarked building in another state, Brennan's handler finished reading her final report and smiled. The bait strategy had been a complete success. The agent had maintained her cover under intense pressure. The entire target network was dismantled. The recovery rate for the stolen gear was at 96%, and the chances of conviction were nearly 100%. The handler closed the file and opened a new one on his screen, ready for the next phase. She was the joke of the platoon, the one they thought they could push around, and for 6 long weeks, they did. But what they didn't know was that the quiet corporal they loved to mock was actually a hunter, and they were the prey. Ever wonder what happens when the underdog is secretly the one in charge? Stick with me. At 1800 hours, Corporal Brennan walked into her barracks room and saw an envelope on her bed. Inside were her new orders, effective in 72 hours. The destination was blacked out, the mission details were gone, but a handwritten note at the bottom said it all. "Well done, Corporal. The next target is bigger. You ready?" She slid the note into her pocket, opened a fresh page in her little green notebook, and wrote 2 words at the top: Phase 2. Underneath, she started making notes. Every cruel joke had taught her exactly which buttons to press on people like them. All the harassment had been a masterclass in how predators think. And the whole charade proved that patience, when used correctly, was a weapon sharper than any knife. Outside, the base was winding down for the night. You could hear the usual sound: soldiers lining up for dinner, lights flickering on in the barracks, a drill sergeant yelling in the distance. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But under that surface, justice was quietly getting its work done. Brennan snapped the notebook shut, lay back on her bunk, and started the breathing exercise that got her through the last 6 weeks of calculated misery. It was a simple 4-count rhythm that would carry her right into whatever came next. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Master Sergeant Jackson. "Heard you're shipping out. One last drink?" She quickly typed back, "Can't. Early morning. But thanks for the backup, Master Sergeant." His reply was almost instant. "Anytime, Corporal. And for the record, that tattoo isn't just for show. It's a promise. Glad you kept it." A small smile touched her lips as she read it, and then she deleted the entire conversation. No evidence, no loose ends. All that mattered was the mission. At 2100 hours, she did her last task of the day. Logging into a secure email, she sent a short message to her handler. "Mission accomplished. All targets neutralized. Ready for phase 2. She added, "Recommend using the same bait strategy on other high-risk bases. The subject is ready and willing to continue." The reply came back in less than 2 minutes. "Copy that. New briefing is attached. Read it, memorize it, then delete it. You go in Monday at 0600. This is a bigger network with smarter players. You'll need every trick you just learned, and then some. You still in?" Brennan's fingers barely hesitated over the keyboard. "Affirmative. I'm ready." The response was immediate. "Good. Because this time, you're hunting someone who knows exactly how hunters operate. Stay sharp, Corporal. And remember, justice isn't loud." She finished the sentence for him, typing out the words that had become her personal motto. "I know. It's patient." She downloaded the file, read it through twice until the key facts were burned into her memory, and then wiped it completely. The new target was a logistics officer who was secretly selling military gear to foreign powers. It was a bigger, more paranoid, and more dangerous operation. And once again, Brennan would become someone completely forgettable, someone easy to look down on, someone they'd never suspect until the trap had already snapped shut. She packed her bag with practiced efficiency. Uniforms, boots, the green notebook, and the dog tags that proved who she really was under any disguise. The last thing she packed, wrapped carefully in a soft cloth, was a special challenge coin. Its edges were worn smooth, and it was stamped with an eagle and a set of coordinates. It was a gift from a Special Forces team she'd saved during a mission called Operation Sandstorm, a team whose names were now classified, whose mission technically never happened, but whose thanks came in the form of a coin she would never spend and a tattoo she would never regret. She held it for a second, feeling the familiar weight of it in her hand, a reminder of her true purpose, then tucked it away. Tomorrow, she was leaving this base behind. Leaving behind Jackson, the corrupt soldiers who thought she was a nobody, and the smugglers who learned the hard way not to underestimate her. But the mission would go on, because somewhere out there, someone was stealing from their country, cheating their brothers in arms, and putting lives on the line for a quick buck. And Corporal Kate Brennan, quiet, patient, and unstoppable, would be there to make it right. The main lights in the barracks clicked off for the night. Down the hall, she could hear other soldiers laughing and hanging out, just living their normal lives, with no idea that one of their own was living a completely different reality. Brennan closed her eyes and let that steady breathing rhythm take over, pulling her towards sleep. 4 seconds in, hold for 4. 4 seconds out, hold for 4. Tomorrow would be a new game with new players and new dangers. But tonight, justice had won. And for now, that was all that mattered. The camera of her story pulls back, out of the room, across the sprawling base, and up into the dark night sky full of cold, distant stars. And somewhere in that darkness, a secure signal pulsed. Phase 2 was officially underway, and all the people out there who thought they were safe, who believed their dirty secrets were buried, who were so sure that no one was watching them. They were all about to learn a very hard lesson. Justice isn't loud, it's patient, and it was already inside their walls.